The WMS Concert Band will be performing alongside the high school December 12th. It is always an impressive event to see the Wilmington High School and Wilmington Middle School concert bands playing together.
World Culture Club, WCC, wrapped up November celebrating some of the traditions of the Native American cultures. Students listened to traditional musics while they learned about their culture and traditions.
Student Council continues to have a very busy time this year. We have planned Spirit Weeks for the week of the 18th to the 22nd. Students and staff are looking forward to donning their ugliest holiday sweaters and favorite sports teams gear. Student Council is also looking forward to winter decorating events. In conjunction with advisory, the students at WMS will be creating snowmen, similar to door decorating, to celebrate and spread that winter spirit.
Robotics Club continues to prepare for the FTC vs. Tech Robotics Challenge for the 2023 and 2024 year. Students are currently constructing their grabbing mechanisms that will allow them to pick up pixels. They will demonstrate their knowledge at the January 6th and 13th qualification rounds. Good luck!
All right, hold on for just a moment there. Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the committee?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Bye, thank you.
Good job. Next, we have approval of items by consensus, and first is approval of the minutes from the November 15th, 2023 regular session. We have a motion. Motion from Ms. Burns, second by Mr. Samaha. All in favor? That is 6 in favor, and I am abstaining. Next, we have approval, second reading and approval of policies. Before we vote on these policies, I have some proposed language changes for 2 of them, the first is on policy ECAC, which is to change the language. First time it appears, it says press the charges to simply press charges, which is the language that is used a little bit further down in the same section. So there's in the first paragraph. And then in policy EDC, this is the authorized use of school-owned materials, to reword the sentence that begins, staff members may use school equipment. This is near the end of the policy. To school equipment may be used by staff members for the purpose of creating parallelism with the next part of the sentence, which says equipment may be used by students, rather than mixing the active and passive voice.
Okay.
So if there are no objections to those additions, then do we have a motion to approve policies EC, ECAC, EDC, and EBCD, 2 of them as amended? Motion by Mr. Turner, second by Mr. Fennelly. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Next, we have the Shawsheen School Odeon Park field trip for June 2024. I don't know if anyone is planning to speak to this at all, but Mr. Turner?
It's a phenomenal field trip. I might have chaperoned it twice. And I think it's been a great tradition now at the Shawsheen. And I'm very glad to see it here again.
Yeah, this is Mr. McCaldy.
Oh, go ahead.
This is an outstanding trip. I've been on it twice. I missed out on the third time during the pandemic, but it's a wonderful, wonderful trip, and I'm glad to see it returning. Dr. McCaldy.
Yeah, so I like the idea of this trip. I was just wondering if there's something comparable at the Woburn Street School, or the Woburn Street School maybe trying to think about getting something comparable to that.
I can speak to that, and Ms. Gutt's here. I don't know if I don't want to put her on the spot, but my understanding is right now that there's not at this time, but possibilities are being explored for future trips. Ms. Gutt, you want to, yeah.
Great, thank you.
All right, so do we have a motion to approve the Shawsheen trip to Odeon Park? Motion by Mr. Fennelly, second by Mr. Samaha. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Now we have warrants. We have grants 13, 14, and 15, revolving 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, and 27, Local 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, and 47, and Food Service 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, and 28. I have a motion. Motion by Mr. Smaha, second by Dr. Bryson. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Then we have circuit breaker warrants 10, 11, 12, and 13. Motion by Mr. Turner, second by Ms. Burns. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Payroll for November 22nd, 2023, and December 6th, 2023. Motion by Mr. Fennelly, second by Mr. Samaha. All in favor? And that is unanimous. And then we have special education warrants 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. Motion by Ms. Burns, second by Mr. Fennelly. All in favor? And that is unanimous.
Excuse me.
And that brings us to the superintendent's report. Dr. Brand.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Two items tonight under the report, and I'll go in order for them, starting with the notification of the community of the tiered focus monitoring visit that's upcoming. You'll find two items in your packet. One is a brief memo from our Student Support Services Department that provides you as a committee and the community members with an overview about what this is all about. And I'll speak to that first in a moment, then bring your attention to the public notice. So we are, as is the case for every public school district, obligated to participate in a variety of reviews from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, otherwise known as DESE. And tiered focus monitoring is the next review that is ongoing and that we will be participating in. This is a 3-year cycle, as noted in the memo, and it really is to take a deeper and closer look at our compliance as a public entity with federal and state special education and civil rights regulations. Last year, as you may recall, 2022-23 school year, we completed a self-assessment portion of the tiered focus monitoring in the area specifically of special education and civil rights. During the upcoming year, the district will participate in the on-site portion of this tiered focus monitoring, in which a team from DESE will visit the district and be gathering additional information on this. This will take place during the week of February the 5th, 2024, and we are already well underway in terms of information gathering and preparation for this. This is a big endeavor. It spans not just the Department of Student Support Services, but really throughout the district, but it's an important one. I'll bring your attention to the second item, which is the public notice that has to go out. I'm going to share this with the committee first. We are obligated, and we will certainly comply with notifying the community of this. And you can see that that public notice that has already been prepared and will be going out, I believe, starting next week. So informational only. I'll pause there, though, if there are any questions from members of the committee on the tiered focus monitoring.
Mr. Samaha.
I just had one quick question. This is something that is done for all districts in the state, right? There's
Correct.
nothing in particular that necessitated this other than this is normal procedure.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for the clarification. Yes.
Any other questions or comments?
Okay, thanks. Moving on, the next item is the fiscal year 23 revolving account report, and with that, I'll turn it over to Paul.
Thank you. In your packet is the FY23 final revolving account report. As you can see, all of our revolving accounts completed the year in the black, and all of these revenues and expenditures have been a part of our end of the year report that we presented to the school committee, I think, back in October. So this is just to close out the year for the revolving accounts.
Questions or comments? Dr. McCaldy?
Just a comment. So, like you said, all the accounts are in the black. So, just want to say thanks for being diligent and monitoring all those and working with the staff to ensure that everything is healthy from the budget perspective. So, thank you.
Inconsistent, year after year, Paul.
Mr. Fennelly?
Yeah, I'll echo that, Paul, but anything unexpected, out of the ordinary, or all pretty straightforward?
Yeah, pretty straightforward, nothing.
Thank you.
Can you talk just a little bit, generally speaking, about why some of our accounts have kind of like large carryover balances? Just some, you know, not at a in the weeds level, but just some of the broad reasons why that's the case.
Sure. One account is a food service account, and part of the reason there is when we transitioned to free breakfast and lunch, the reimbursement rate from the government, either the federal government or the state, is a little bit higher than what we would charge for meal prices and so forth. Plus, there was some other areas that we had not spent certain funds. So starting in FY23, first of all, we renegotiated a contract. We also are in the process of hiring some additional staff to fill some open positions that we have. So a lot of that money will be eaten up, if you will, as well as replacing certain pieces of equipment, ovens, stoves, and so forth through various schools. So we're working on that. We know the balance is a little bit high. We typically would keep 3 to 4 months of operating expenses anyway in that account, just to carry over for us. But Mary Palin is working feverishly on that area. So, and then some of the other ones are typical increases. CARES department, the CARES revolving accounts up a little bit again, and that's really, we haven't touched tuitions for quite a few years, so it's not that, it's just the number of students enrolled, and we're keeping the ratios and so forth. So Patty Bozier and Gina Herrera, who run that program, again, are working with their staff to come up with other enrichment opportunities for students, as well as making sure they're taking all the training that they can get and so forth. So we're working on that. And some of the other ones that kind of could be timing, when revenues come in and when expenditures occur. For instance, athletics has a little bit of that, and so forth. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, I think.
Great, okay,
All right.
thank you.
And that is the superintendent report. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Mr. Federley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We received a number of...
Thank you, Abby and Genevieve, and have a good night.
Good night. Received a number of written submissions that were included in the packet, which I know we've reviewed prior to the meeting. We do have one individual that signed up to make an in-person public comment, James Morawski. Please, sorry. Feel free to join us either at the table, the microphone. We would ask you to state your name and address for the minutes, and we do ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes, please, and thank you. And good evening.
Good evening. My name is James Morawski. I live at 12 Gloria Way. Wanted to say this is a letter that I'm going to submit asking for your assistance. I have an elementary and a middle school student. During the last school committee meeting of November 15th, the transportation director was asked, would an additional bus help here in town? The response was no, it would only save 5 to 10 minutes. 2 days later, we received an email from the transportation director sent to my wife and I. The email indicated that our bus stop for our 8-year-old son would be eliminated, with effect the Monday after Thanksgiving. My son would have to catch the bus a quarter mile away on another street. This was to save 2 minutes on the bus route. We questioned the safety, we questioned the safety of the walk and the stop that had no sidewalks as you walk up to the stop. We asked for clarification on the decision to eliminate the stop. The transportation director wrote, this change has been reviewed with the Traffic and Safety Department of Wilmington Police Department, and they are supportive of the shift with no concerns to safety. This is misleading. Officer Fiore indicated to us that the new bus stop was safe, but did not support the shift, and he was not the decision maker in such matters. It's troubling that one person wields the power to eliminate a stop with 1 week's notice 3 months into the year. With the power comes consideration for how your decisions affect those you service. This is a stop that has been in place for 18 years. Why now is it suddenly prudent to eliminate the stop that prior administration deemed necessary? The short notice doesn't allow us the time to put means in place to handle the change. During the school committee meeting earlier this year, Dr. Brand said that switching back to last year's schedule is not possible as parents have already altered their schedules and put arrangements in place. However, it's okay to remove our stop with a week's notice during a holiday. Folks, this isn't right. This is not tweaking the service during the second week of school. You've eliminated a stop. What are the goals of the transportation service? Is it to be able to say all the buses are getting to school on time regardless of the effects of the people who rely on it? This is the service for the town of Wilmington. However, it is not the same service we received last year or in years past. We spend now an additional 4 hours a week transporting our children to school, including waiting in the parking lot because you have to get in line, as well as driving to the bus stop. This has a real economic impact for my family, and there is so much unnecessary household stress created by all the changes this year. How do we as a community determine how well the service is doing? I would suggest that you send a survey to those who use the bus and provide feedback. Ask them how I'm just about done. Ask them how they've been impacted and share their thoughts on what's working and what's not. You need to solicit this feedback and share the results. For my son's bus, the 2 minutes of savings has him arriving at Woburn Street School now at 8:59, still does not have the bus to the north in time for the start of school. Why wouldn't we add another bus for this route to get all the kids from bus 8 to school on time? In closing, I ask you to reinstate our bus stop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other public comments? Okay. Thank you.
Now we turn to new business, and our first item of new business are the school improvement plans for the elementary schools.
Thanks very much, and again, good evening. Well, our principals come up if you'd like to. Just some points of introduction here for the first of what will be two different presentations for our school improvement plans. This evening, we'll hear from our elementary principals who are, as you can see, here together working truly as a team. At the next school committee meeting, the last one before the winter break, our secondary presentations will be made, of course, covering the middle school and the high school. Just, again, for those that are tuning in, maybe from the community and not exactly sure what this is all about, school improvement plans are an important responsibility of individual school councils. In the state of Massachusetts, school councils are required at each of our public schools, and we're pleased and proud to say that we have those operating at all of our schools here. Think of the school council as a collaborative working group that includes both staff as well as community representatives who come together and work with the leadership of the principal to try and make decisions around those things that seem most important to help move the school forward. And our effort to try and align with that is no different. We have policies, you have policies that speak to both school councils as well as school improvement plans. And as we have done in the past, they're here for presentation to give you a sense of what the priority areas look like. They're not. It's not something that under current state law, it did change some time ago. The school committees approve, and in the past you have not approved, but we think nevertheless it's important to present these to you. They are windows in terms of the working relationships that our principals have with our school councils, as I said, to try and identify those things that are most important. Not only is it a case, though, that the principals here before you have worked with their councils, but they've also worked closely with each other. We made the shift a number of years ago, I forget how many now, but really with the overarching understanding that by and large, while there's some variations, the central issues that are most important to help moving ahead, in this case our elementary schools, are shared across the schools. And the feedback has been positive in the past around this group coming before you as a team. It might look a little bit different in the middle and high school, but not here at the elementaries. And I think that makes good sense. So with all of that, thank you folks for being here. I'll turn it over to you. You have both this presentation in your packet as well as all of the individual plans as well. So we know it's a lengthy document, but we wanted that for your reference. So I'm not sure who's teeing it off, but yeah.
Well, actually, we're just going to introduce ourselves to, we all know all of you, but to the community that's watching. So I'm Lisa King, the principal at the Shawshing Elementary School.
Stacy Scott, the principal at the Woburn Street School.
Diane Quero, principal at North.
Ed Foster, principal at the West.
Kate Bissell, principal of the Wildwood.
Kristen Walsh, principal at the Bellwood. So Dr. Brand so nicely was able to capture a little bit about school improvement plans, and we just wanted everybody to know before we get started that This is a process that we start, before the school year happens. We started in the spring of last year. We branch off of the strategic plan that we all work so hard and are involved with. And as Dr. Grant said, we work with our school councils. We also work together. And you will see a few variations within our presentation, and that is because even though we are working together, there are still, we still are individual schools, and we have data on our culture survey that we use, different other information, and from our school councils that may add another variation or possibly an extra action step within the goals. So you'll see that tonight, and since we all worked together and we're sharing these goals, we're going to start off and we're just going to move our way right on down the line. So,
all right, so as a team, we formulated 3 goals. So our first goal is over the next 2 years, the elementary team will shift to the utilization of an evidence-based structured approach in literacy through Tier 1 instructional practices, universal screening tools, and targeted intervention. And we have 5 initiatives that we are looking to focus towards.
So one of our first initiatives is that teachers will have training, administer and utilize the DIBELS, Amplify to assess students and inform instruction.
Our second initiative that we're focusing on within the next 2 years is to identify teachers will pilot the components of the 2 structured ELA curriculum programs. That's already in process right now, which is going really well in their classrooms, and then they'll help select the new ELA program for the K-5.
And then all classroom teachers will be trained in and explicitly teach the components of the new reading curriculum in their classroom.
Utilizing the assistance from our reading specialists and Melissa Bentoncourt, we're going to hold informative sessions for families to learn more about the shift in literacy practices, literacy programming, and initiatives at Wilmington Public Schools, and how families can support their children at home, including specific topics such as literacy screening, intervention and support, and dyslexia.
And then also, it's important that the building principals are going to be trained too in the new reading curriculum in ways that we're going to be able to support our staff, implementation, and be able to provide ongoing feedback to strengthen the instructional practices during our walkthroughs.
Great. So school goal 2 is students, staff, and families will experience an increased sense of belonging and connectedness to the school and greater community. The, sorry, I have 2 jobs here. So the first initiative or action step will be the panorama data will be utilized to identify students at risk, and interventions will be provided to support student success in the social emotional realm.
Okay, and PBIS programming will be evaluated regularly and adjustments made as needed to best meet the needs of the school community.
Our third initiative will be MARC liaisons will meet with the coordinator of behavioral health and SEL at regular intervals throughout the school year to ensure consistent implementation for the anti-bullying MARC program.
Okay, and finally, opportunities will be developed to create connections between buildings and the greater Wilmington community to foster stronger relationships and belonging.
So we did have 2 variations or 3 variations for goal 2 at the Shawsheen. Do you want me to talk about it?
Sure. So exploring and incorporating enrichment opportunities for students before, during, or after school, utilizing school, district, grant, and community resources.
Similarly, at the intermediate level, extracurricular activities will be examined and researched. And also, culture and climate survey results will be reviewed by the leadership team and school council, and areas of focus will be identified. Intervention plans developed and instituted accordingly, depending on what's called for through the survey.
For school goal number 3, we will foster equitable and inclusive schools through a variety of avenues, supporting the well-being of all members of our school community. So the first initiative is that identifying that communication will be provided to all of our families in their home language to ensure that they have equal access to all school-related information. We're also at the early childhood level. We are going to be reviewing classroom library books and resources that explore diversity and inclusion. I should say that includes all of them. However, we'll also be purchasing books that would provide more opportunities for diversity within our classrooms.
We are also focusing here on some of the resources, including Care Solace, which would provide referrals to families and/or staff for wraparound services to support some of these this goal, and to incorporate culturally responsive teacher practices. That will be part of, I know, some principals' goals to get some PD into the district and work with all of us to help make that happen in our classrooms. Again, there are some variations this time. Specifically at the early childhood centers, both Kristen and I felt that not only do we need to be specifically looking at library books and classroom libraries, but also at play materials at the early childhood level. So to add that as a specific goal at our level. And then Lisa.
Another variation. It kind of goes along with my other goal a little bit, but collaborate with other local community associations to partner with to identify resources to foster the needs of our diverse learners.
What questions do you have for us?
Just if I may, just really quick. Thank you for the presentation. We want to open up for questions in a second. But one of the things that I know vividly when I came to this district almost 6 years ago was the fact that with operating 6 schools, sometimes we weren't always rowing in the same direction or more in unison. And that's understandable with so many different schools. But one of the things that also became clear when I arrived here was a real desire to try and do that, to try and, despite having 6 elementary schools, to try and be more together, literally and figuratively. With Miss Elliott's leadership as well, I know she's worked really hard with our principals, and so I'm really proud of the work that they've done, not just to be here physically in front of you as a group, but also really as you get hopefully a sense of the effort here is to provide a very similar elementary education, no matter what side of town your child might go to, no matter what grade level that they might be. And while there are some differences, and we still want to support that, we want to make sure that there's a holistic program and experience for students no matter where you go to school here in Wilmington. So thanks for your work. And just to say, both Ms. Elliott and I certainly support this plan, and the idea is central to it. So thanks.
All right, questions and comments? Ms. Burns.
I thank you for your presentation. I like it that it's clear that where it ties into the strategic plan, but and I love that aspect. I also love the cultural responsive teaching focus in the PD. I think that's huge. But I will say, and I speak to my board, and it's no disrespect, that what I see are actions and not measurable outcomes. I don't know what the end result of this year or the timelines you provided. What are we as a board supposed to, or the community themselves, supposed to see by a certain point? It allows me to understand when you come forth, granted this is a 2-year plan, I understand, the progress within your schools, in your direction, for your staff. Without measurable goals as to what you think you can attain the first year, or even the second year, how many families you capture. I do see that in comparing, I did look at previous school improvement plans, not for so much the content, because I know we've been doing PBIS for several years now, and I know, like mental health, everything continues to evolve, and so targeting that, I think it is absolutely and still a strong point, but there's a lot that I'm amiss at, because I don't know what the evidence aspects are. I think the actions, and a lot of what's listed as measurable outcomes are really actions, but I'm familiar with getting evidence, whether it be through CIT days where these certain aspects are implemented or discussed, for professional development. But I just feel, I have no issues with the goals. I think they're solid goals. I would like to see more community engagement besides the Care Solace resource, because I do think that we have outliers, especially those whose children are in special education, or I'm going to say gender diverse. I'm not sure if that's I'm trying to encapsulate all that are outliers and may not seek that, even though that they could probably benefit the most. I kind of like to see, and I think that is what those measurable goals, like those outcomes that we can expect to see, may be helpful, just to see if we're on the right path with what we the drive, you know what I mean, and how you strategize the goals year to year. Because I know it's an evolving and it's entwined. So I'm just, again, the goals themselves, I think they're solid, I think they're strong, but I do have reservations, whether it be voting. My reservations are because I don't know what the outcomes we are looking for. And I think I would struggle going into the next year and the evolution of our goals as to, well, how did you come to the next step? Because I don't know what happened. Like, where were we when, do you know what I mean? It's your thought process for your school. So that's kind of where I kind of stand.
Dr. Bryson?
Sure. And I think, so I don't disagree with you, MJ, and I think I would just love to know what would be success for you. And so, and I think like, how many parent university sessions? I know that we have those numbers. How many literacy information events? So I wonder if just by simply adding some more like examples or what you're looking for, you have some places, increased student benchmark data. I'm guessing all students will participate in universal screening. So I wonder if for us, just adding some of those pieces to help us identify what
like a certain
what the goal
percentage
is.
will be captured.
Sure.
Like with the PBIS, with the bullying aspect, how many data from the formal bullying complaints, that could be used as a data source, or those type of data pools. So we like percentages. I know I'm not a numbers person, Michael is, but those type of concrete things for me, because I do need a little simplistic. I'm a layman when it comes to that. I recognize that, but I just want to make sure that those expectations of what Dr. Bryson says, how do we know, where's your success level? What are you hoping to achieve? Is what I really kind of like to see, because it drives everything that we do, not only for the goals and the curriculum aspect, but budgetary. And are we succeeding? You know what I mean? In answering to parents, are we succeeding within our schools? And if not, then it's a larger discussion. But I'll relinquish the floor.
I think the difference in how goal 1 and goal 2 are phrased gets a little bit at some of this point here. That if you look at goal 2, students will experience an increased sense of belonging. It's an outcome that we're looking for, of some kind. Goal 1 is really a process. It's almost the method to get to a goal, that we want to shift to this, the evidence-based theory and Tier 1 instructional practices and so forth. But it's like, for what purpose? Like, what exactly are we hoping to accomplish or see as a result of doing this? So there's a little bit, and goals are always, the measurability of goals is always tricky, because if you don't think about it at all, then it's just easy to just throw ideas out there, and there's no sense of how do you account for whether you're even approaching accomplishing them, whether what you're doing is working. But there are some for which it's just really hard to measure them, like an experience, increased sense of belonging and connectedness to the school. That's a hard thing to measure. I mean, you can do the surveys and the culture and climate, but that's still, if you try to pin down everything to like a measurable outcome, we will see a 6% increase in XYZ. That introduces a lot of weird artificialities into the system of like suddenly trying to hit the metrics rather than focusing on the actual points that the metrics were supposed to be about. And so that's always a tension in doing these kinds of plans.
Could I just respond to one?
Please.
And reviewing the old one, like that sense of inclusion and the community involvement, this has been a goal over several years, and it's evolved in a variety of different ways. Looking at a previous school improvement plan, I know that, forgive me, but I can't remember which school, organized a staff, parent, a family event. I think it was at a baseball game, Paw Sox or Worcester Sox, trying to engage the school community, staff, administrators, and families for a social event. I think that was that to me was a measurable goal, if not evidence, which I thought was ingenious, you know what I mean? And I think it does foster unity and that inclusion piece. And it's only because it was in one of the 2017-18. I thought that was a great idea. As I think that the knowledge base is helpful, but I think what I didn't see clearly. Not to say it certainly wasn't intended, but is those type of opportunities in our goals. Is by what other measures are we going to engage our parents and our families into our, you know what I mean, for these social events? I know there's social events. I know the PACs do things, but I think I don't want us to lose our creativity because over the past 12 years, I've seen some fantastic engagement with families in just creative ways, engaging students. And I need a little diversity in my life. This is wonderful, but I want to make sure that we offer in Wilmington a well-rounded education with different experiences. And I think this may be the box we work within, but I just want to make sure we're just not, I don't want to say one note because I think that's a little vague, but I want to make sure it's the word, motivating and for students and families to come out, to participate. You guys invest so much time in these events like Parent University and these things that parents need to know. How do we engage them to come? Zoom is a good way, but I just want to make sure we're thinking outside of the box, being diverse in how we approach some of our goals outside of the professional, the professional development, these type of structured things. How can we be more creative? And I just for that diverse experience, because I think that does offer buy-in, and I think there does come from a sense of community when everyone feels like they're on the same path. You know what I mean? And I don't know, when they come together out of the environment or such, but I'm going to.
Dr. Bercaldi.
Yeah, no, thanks. So I think just follow on with this conversation. Maybe something that all of you have worked on is you have these outcomes which are great, but then how do you know if they work to achieve the goal? So number one, maybe it's a little bit more tangible. Do you see certain increases in reading scores or a certain amount of kids that transition out of needing reading help to reading independently? Like, could those metrics be applied at all? Are they something that we would even want to apply, like a certain increase or anything like that? 2 and 3, I think I agree with David. They're a little bit more, hey, we're going to try to make this work, but those to me don't really have a good measurable outcome in a way, because we're trying to create a certain environment. So our outcome is, hey, we created the environment, and then we just have to kind of check the sentiment of the community and everything. So that was just something I was kind of thinking, maybe interpreting what you were saying a little bit more. Just want to hear thoughts from the rest of the committee on that, if anything.
Mr. Turner?
So thank you very much for the presentation. And I do understand some of the feedback already. A couple particular points in regards to the second goal, and the bottom initiative that has some really good ideas for interconnection amongst the schools, and I really like the way that's thought through, and I would like to understand how that does play out in practice over the next couple of years. So what you do see in terms of high school internships, is that something that comes in at a higher level, and what do the kids, both the high school students and the students within your schools, what benefits do they get from those types of programs? If there's ways, either before or after, discussing with the students how their experience was, could be a very good and very interesting thing, both for the students in your community and certainly for the students in the high school. And again, that's one example in that box, but there's several other places where the same sort of thinking applies. And I do want to call out one thing that I particularly appreciate, because I've brought this topic up before. In the bottom goal, talking about Care Solis, provided to families and or staff. I really appreciate the inclusion of staff in that. I do think the support of our staff is a very important thing. I'm very, very happy to see this in here, and I really appreciate it, so thank you.
Mr. Smaha.
Again, I echo what people are saying in terms of thanking you guys for really working together on this and thinking some of this stuff through. I'm curious about a couple of the ways that some of these goals sort of are connected with each other. So, for example, you're talking about the two structured ELA curriculum programs. And I'm curious how that might then relate to goal 3, where you're talking about diversifying classroom libraries. Because one of the, when I think about this idea, and I appreciate this initiative being in there, but sometimes I worry that when people are looking to diversify libraries, they get a bunch of new books and they go on the shelf, but they're not integrating them into the curriculum. They're not really being used. Maybe they're featured every once in a while, but they're not really a part of the classroom. They're just kind of like on the shelf. And if they're just on the shelf, that's not really, I don't think, being, that's not really integrating these books into the daily life of the classroom, which is what you want in a classroom library. So I'm curious about, like, when you're evaluating the 2 ELA curriculum programs, if the diversity within each of those curriculums might be something to think about as one thing as you're evaluating, is this curriculum, are they using diverse texts in this curriculum, and that maybe can align a little bit between those two goals. So that's one area that I was thinking about. One of the other pieces that the translation part of this, I thought that was really important. I think that was great. I actually, I kind of disagree a little bit on some of these with some of my colleagues on. I think that there are some good. I think there are measurable outcomes on a lot of these, where in terms of you're going to translate all of them, right? That's an easy, measurable thing to do. The trainings, that if the trainings are happening, then you can sort of assess whether you've met that goal. Have you increased knowledge? So one of the questions that I have is the data from the Care Solace. What kind of data do you guys get from Care Solace, and like how do you envision using that?
So what we do is we receive, we work very collaboratively with our family engagement specialists, our school counselors. If we have to make referrals, whether it be, for families or whatever, we get feedback. We figure out if there's been, a follow-up with that, who they've been, not who they've been connected to, but if there's been some follow wraparound services, then we make sure that we're collaborating with families and students to then also work with them to make sure that support's being done here at school. We work very closely with them to ensure that that's happening. There's been a lot of positive outcomes that have come out from that since we've been implementing Care Solace in our schools. So we definitely feel that, with the help of the family engagement specialists, our school counselors, families are happy they're getting the help that they need, the support that they need, the resources that they need. So we're seeing a lot of positives that come out of that. Every year, it's not like, oh, we've been, there's been X amount, we know how many referrals have happened. It continues to increase. I just think we all are aware that since COVID, there's been, a focus on a lot of people needing various resources, and there's been some fallout from COVID. Some families have been really struggling since then. So it continues to be something that we monitor, and we are ensuring that those supports are continuing to be in place.
The other piece to that is over the summer, families get a survey in regards to whether or not they, need any support, or and our family engagement specialists reach out to those families and see, because even though it's 2 months, it's 2 months that they've been away from school, they've been away from us. So, and then we meet with them in, August, September, just to see which kids are on your radar, and who do we need to have on our radars when school starts. So we hit the ground running. We don't have to wait for any surprises that might come up.
That's for a point of clarification, or really just definition. So a couple of times wraparound services have been mentioned, and that's a bit of a term of art in education, and I'm not sure everyone watching necessarily knows what that term kind of is, what it means. Can someone speak to that a little bit?
It could look differently for different students. For some students, it could be they might need support in the home. They might need support getting to school. They might need, different, it's catered to what students need, but it's supports outside of
Therapeutic
school.
support,
Yeah.
about that, yep.
Okay, Dr. McCauley?
Thanks. So, a few questions. So, one, thank you for putting all this together, and it's great to see all 6 of you working together. That's really good to see. So, one question I have is, Goal 1's focused on, language arts and reading, right? Why focus on that? Why not focus on math and social studies and everything else? Why was that picked as the one focal point?
Well, it is part of our strategic plan,
Yeah.
so that's the first thing. So just to clarify, all of our goals are connected to the strategic plan. That's where we start. And also because we're getting a new curriculum. So with the new curriculum comes the goal, because it's going to take years to get that implementation. So that's really the reason. We are in need of a new curriculum. We know this, so that's why we're piloting this year. And it's going to be a huge aspect of the school next year in all of our schools is implementing this curriculum. So it's really important that we have it as a main focus.
Last year, we got a new social studies curriculum in the
Yeah,
elementary
that's our
levels, and that was one of our school improvement goals last year was for knowledge and awareness of the new social studies curriculum to help roll that out.
I also think it's important to mention that Wilmington is making a shift to focus more on the science of reading, and pulling away from the Lucy Calkins, but the Writer's Workshop model and so that is part of this. It's an enormous shift. It's a different mindset. It's one that I think is being embraced by many. And I think it's really important, especially with DESE, with the new regulations, with the dyslexia screening, it's very important that we make that shift to the science of reading, and so that's why we really wanted to focus on this being one of our school improvement goals, because this is a district shift, not just an individual school shift.
Sure. No, that all makes sense. Another question I have is, saw some of the variations between some of the schools. Wonder if you could explain how you arrived at those and why you agreed to have variations.
So we had our culture and climate survey that was given in the spring. All parents and then students at what grade?
Third grade.
Third grade, fifth grade, and then middle and high school were given the survey. So we received those results, and we were able to glean from those results what was really needed to be actionable within our school.
Sure. So hence that was
staff
using
as well.
that data.
Staff too, thank you.
That's
Staff.
what made the variations.
Yes.
That makes sense. And then my last question is, I imagine this will probably get sent out to students, but parents and guardians and everyone, or is this going to be kind of kept
Usually
here?
posted on our website.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm a new guy, still learning the lingo. I was wondering if you could maybe add a cheat sheet or something at the end about some of the acronyms. So what Tier 1 means, PBIS, Care Solace. I'm still kind of learning, but I imagine I'm not alone in that. So, and in my day job, I'm very guilty of that. I'm an engineer. We speak another language, so I get it. All right. Thank you very much, and this was great. Thank you.
I would like, I had a thought similar to what Dr. McCauley was asking, which is anytime you look at a plan like this, which has to have a small number of goals, there's always a tendency to look at it and just be like, but what about everything else? It's just like, but what about science and what about social studies and and 100 other things that we know are important. And you just have to remind yourself that just the plan can't be about everything. Mm-hmm. Just because it's not here doesn't mean it's not happening. It's just that these plans require a certain amount of focus. And yes, it's there's only one academic goal out of the 3 goals mentioned. That doesn't mean that we don't care about academics anymore, and it doesn't mean that the only thing that matters is literacy and ELA, and that we're not also focusing on all these other areas. But a plan like this by nature just it has to be focused. It has to be somewhat narrow, and have a couple of priorities that are the focus of the plan. So you don't want to be misled by this and think that therefore we don't care about all the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Walsh.
Also, just to clarify, you know, in regards to goal 3, you know, and I understand there's been years of, you know, making sure that we're being inclusive, and so what isn't on here is all the things that happen. So just because they're not on here doesn't mean those things aren't happening in the schools. So, you know, we work very collaboratively with our school advisory councils, with our parent advisory councils, and we one of the things I think we all pride ourselves on is making sure that we form these community partnerships with different organizations within the town of Wilmington and beyond, where we are ensuring that, you know, we're having these events together. But some of the feedback that, you know, I know personally that I received that I didn't realize until I asked for it was some of my families, when I would send out this information, English wasn't their first language, and so they weren't even getting the communication in their home language to be able to participate in said events. So I think looking at this, we have to look really at kind of that first step, right? And making sure, because I believe it, I apologize, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I believe there are about 24 to 27 different languages spoken, you know, languages spoken within our district, and so we have to be mindful of that. That's been a huge increase from even 5 years ago. You know, so I think some of the feedback that I've received was, you know, families, they weren't aware because they didn't understand it because it wasn't in their home language. So although, you know, these things are still going on, I think we have to really look down and say, okay, we want to make sure that everyone's voices are heard, everyone's getting that invitation, and everyone's welcome to join us. And how can we strengthen that to make sure that it is open to everybody. So I just want to just make sure that you're aware that all those things are going on, you know, and even though it's not on here, and you know,
I think a measurable goal, like it's seeing those what those are, that's an outcome. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and having more, you know, by those actions, more families of different cultural backgrounds, different languages will participate.
And
I think that's
participating in other things that we didn't participate in before because we haven't had the diversity,
right.
You know, 5-10 years ago. You know, so I think that's just important to note.
No, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Dr. Bryson?
I do want to say that I think the goals look great. The only thing I would push back a tiny bit on is goal 1, where you say over the next 2 years, the elementary team will shift to the utilization of an evidence-based structured approach and I know what you're doing here, but I think a lot of what you've been doing has been evidence-based. It may not be sort of really sitting in what everyone's calling science of reading, but you've been doing things that are science of reading all along. I know there are shifts, but I don't think this is a brand new thing for Wilmington. You've been collecting data, you've been doing interventions, it's strengthening, yes, but I don't think that we weren't and now we are. So I don't know if I don't know if that's something that I'm just like, well, you have been doing a lot of that. So I don't think it's gonna be, I know over the next 2 years, our targeted, all of that's going to get better, but I think that in some ways that there's a lot of wonderful stuff that has been happening over the last many years, and you should take some credit for that. So I don't know if you want to shift that a bit, just because when people see this, they're like, ooh, you haven't been doing that? And I'm like, no, we've been doing that. Maybe not in the way Desi and, you know, Sold a Story is sort of saying it, but I know we've been doing it that way. So I think that there's a little bit of space there to say, we're going to continue to do the utilization, whatever, but I don't know if you want to be so kind of we weren't and now we are. But other than that, I think that everything else looks great, and I'm really excited to see what comes of it. So thanks for being here. And the fact that you're all sitting here together is really just incredible. And we're so excited to see you all working together and knowing that students in all places are here getting leadership that's really integrated and consolidated. It's just exciting. So thank you very much.
We like each other.
I do have to
We
say,
can
I do like this presentation so much to have you all together.
I have one last thing that I want to just unpack, which is going back to some of the sort of terms of art that in the third goal, well, it's not mentioned in the goal, but in the various action steps, there's and it's in all the individual plans, culturally responsive teaching. And again, an educational term of art, and I would like if you could talk a little bit about what that is and also what that looks like at the different levels, because even though in some ways we're all here as the elementary group, it's going to look differently at the intermediate schools than at the EECs. And so if we can talk a little bit about what that looks like at different grade levels and even just what it is for people who just kind of aren't familiar with the term.
So I think if you look at some of the measurable outcomes of success or some examples, it looks, I mean, we're we're put this on as a goal because we're also, you know, learning and immersing ourselves in this, right? That this is part of it. But some of the examples is increased knowledge of holidays and customs, celebrated by staff and students, book buddies on a regular basis throughout the school, incorporation of PBS learning videos on specific topics into classrooms. I know you've been doing a lot of stuff, some stuff at school already with your culturally responsive.
We're doing a book study at our school. We didn't start it yet though. On culturally responsive teaching in the brain by Savannah Hammond.
Yeah, and so we've just recently subscribed to Optic, and Optic will allow us to calibrate, do some observations of teachers teaching and be able to calibrate our interpretation of what's going on and, you know, what kind of feedback, calibrate our feedback back to the teacher and really be looking for that, the culturally responsive teaching that we, I think we're all still learning about this. And so it's really basic level for right now, so which is why this will probably span, you know, for the next 2 years, and then we'll be probably in 2 years sitting here again writing another goal about how we're going to take what we've learned and really think about first from us how, you know, how we need to be all on the same page about what that looks like, and then be able to come back to our schools and show our teachers what does this mean, what are our expectations, what will we be looking for when we come in to observe in your classroom. I hope that helps.
Are there any other questions or comments?
I have just a question. So going forth in next year, will there be a discussion prior to the presentation of goals going forth? What successes, you know how I know Mrs. King and, you know, that previously you have a little blurb, this is what we succeeded at this year, and this is how it aligns with the next steps on our school goals going forth. Will that be, I would, because.
To provide over almost like a
just an overview, a summary of
how it went, how it
The
went,
goals will be
right.
the same next year, so we can certainly come back and provide you with
Progress.
all the
Progress updates.
progress
Right.
and where we're at moving forward with more specific.
That would be great, just so that we can follow along in that.
And also, just another point too, to kind of echo what Mr. Ragsdale said about, like, this is a portion of what we do. It's not all we do, and we don't stop and say, okay, we did this, so that's it. We're not going to do any more community things or this. We also have our own professional practice goals. We also have our own student learning goals. Within our evaluations and supervisions with Dr. Brand, we take these specific goals and we show evidence to him several times during the year. So we are held accountable, right, for a lot of these different outcomes and different things that we do. And then, you know, every year we take that data and we try to just keep moving forward. So I just wanted to share that, yes, this is a glimpse and that is accurate because it is not all we do by any means. And this document is a big collaboration, and even though we are not working with all of our families, we're taking information from our families, we're taking information from our staff and our students and each other in the district, and then we're compiling this document to the best of our ability. So I just wanted everyone to know that.
I know this has gone on, but the final couple comments. Thank you again for your collective efforts. You've heard a number of times tonight the tie to our strategic plan, and this is just as a reminder why this is a little bit later than normal when we deliberately delayed such to allow our principals and our school councils to develop these plans in alignment with the strategic plan that was, as you know, developed really at the beginning of the school year. Just as a reminder for everyone, these are, while they're here before you as representative of their schools, these plans are coming from their school councils. And so I know that they will take back some of the comments and feedback that you provided to their councils. These plans are here because their councils have supported them. And a reminder, the councils are collective, collective representation from their school communities at large. The 2-year plan cycle is what we're at, and I think that that's a great place to be, and the feedback around sort of what are the hits and misses, or what has been able to be accomplished and such is a good element that we can actually add to it when they're next here before you. So thanks a lot for the rich conversation, and I'm sure they appreciate it, and thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you for being here.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you all.
I don't have a motion. You have asked us in the past to approve these plans, but I don't think that we have a motion to do
We don't, we checked, we did not,
Last year's minutes.
yeah.
For both this and the secondary schools, and it was, did not.
And we did not.
Voted for approval.
I would like to recommend that maybe, because I see this as next year will be a mid-cycle
Right,
goal
right.
placed at, maybe at that point, to have measurable, saying where the, that summary would
Right.
have a measurable goal, what they hope to attain at the end of that goal cycle.
Right.
I think would be great as they create the next 2-year
Sure.
plans.
Yeah. Well, the school committee's not required to.
That's right.
To
No,
approve those,
no.
those plans. They've heard our feedback, obviously.
Right, right, and.
It was just a
yes.
recommendation. It wasn't.
No, I like, and I
Oh.
very much like the idea of having the sort of the intermediate progress update.
Right, sure.
Next year, just
Yep.
as we've done in the traditional superintendent evaluation process.
Of course.
Excuse me.
Thank you. All right, next is capital plan.
Great, thank you, and we'll have Mr. Lord as he's coming up to join certainly Paul and I here. There's a presentation that is in your packet, thank you. Thanks so much. And this next item of business is capital planning for fiscal year 25 to 29. This is, of course, very much connected to the budget planning that we will be before you your next meeting with a preliminary budget for fiscal year 25 or the 2024-25 school year. That will roll off the tongue easily enough, soon enough. But we thought that we would separate this, the capital portion, just because there will certainly be enough information to cover in that budget plan itself. And so we thought we would do this tonight. And as well, we've already, as is typically the case, submitted these requests to the town. And so we thought we would bring some focus to this. And Mr. Lord's here tonight as well, because as is often the case, there's an awful lot of items connected to his department and technology. So we thought it would be most appropriate to have him here. So tonight, in the presentation, we'll talk about, again, the overarching capital requests that the district has submitted to the town for fiscal year 25 through 29, with a more specific focus on information technology. And then to conclude with one of the items that's included in fiscal year 26, and that's a proposal for the West Side schools. We'll get to that in just a moment. So capital, this resembles what has been typically the approach that the district has taken in the past. That is to say that we provide the best overview that we can with the information that we have before us to plan those larger ticket items. Think about capital as life expectancy of 5 years, right? 5 years it has to have. And so this is a separate category. I can't speak to it as precise as I know my colleague Paul can, but around how the town approaches the funding for that. It is part of the large budget picture, but there's a separate allocation for capital projects, and all of the different departments in town submit these, fire, police, and so on. There's a lot of lines here that, but really intended to provide you with a landscape overview of the various capital projects. These often do change and can change from year to year. For example, there could be an item that is by definition capital that we think is in a good place today. Next month, that could break, require replacement, and it's something that then gets added to the list. Similarly, there could be something else that emerges, like, for example, a grant that's become available that we might be able to target a particular item that we know is on here and that we can then remove. So it's fair to say that it's fluid. It's not a static forecast, but it's certainly still, again, more than a best guess that we have. You can see the budget breakdown. Right now, the total amount for fiscal year 25 amounts to $724,000, and that covers a range of items. Again, mostly, not exclusively, but mostly technology. The district continues to purchase special education vans. That's part of a replacement cycle planning, and I know that Paul can speak more to that, and then some other tech items. We can pause there, or if you want, just to go through the technology piece and then maybe come back for questions, if that's all right. Want to approach it that way?
Sure. Why don't we do the technology first and
Okay,
talk about
sure.
that, and then we'll separately discuss the study.
Mr. Lord.
Sure. So, as Dr. Brent said, we have a schedule, a 5-year schedule here of various technology projects. If you just maybe go back one slide.
Yep, sorry.
So going down the list, just for the FY25 requests, the Chromebook replacement is a multi-year project to upgrade and replace Chromebooks throughout the district. We have about 1,300 Chromebooks in the district. So just in the elementary schools alone, there are 42 carts of Chromebooks. So just, it's a lot of maintenance, a lot of work, and they're doing wonderful, they work great, but, they do require maintenance and replacement over time. A couple lines down, we have elementary projector replacements. You may recall in the last few years, we've done a lot of projector replacements in the school, and that replaced the oldest category of projectors in those schools. This $55,000 would replace some of the ones that were kind of in the middle age in that range. These are all actually on the west side of town. High school switch replacement. Over the last couple of years, we've been replacing our network switch infrastructure. These are things that my network administrator and I geek out about and love, and nobody else even sees or cares about. But this is the backbone of the network. This is what really drives and connects everything that's in the system. This switch project, actually, the total cost is almost $200,000. But we receive E-rate reimbursement funds. So the federal E-rate reimbursement program allows us to get discounts on Category 1, which is like internet connections, and Category 2, which is hardware. So we have I think it's a 5-year cycle, a 4-year cycle of money they allocate we can use. This will eat up the last of the money that's allocated to us. But that will replace all the network switches in this school, which were all put in when the building opened. High school projectors. 2 years ago, we had a project to start the high school projector replacement, and we did the first floor and the second floor projectors. We wanted to do the third floor, the last of them, last year, but this project got put off a year. So this sum of money would complete the replacement of all the classroom projectors on the third floor and also replace the one above my head. So, high school wireless upgrade. This is the last step in a multi-year project to replace and upgrade all the wireless systems across the school district. We've already replaced all the elementary and middle school network wireless systems. The high school was a slightly newer system, so we've held off on that one, and that would replace this system. Paul can speak to minivans if you have questions for that. And then high school security camera improvements. So the high school and middle school security camera systems work very well, but there's a limited number of cameras in certain areas. Believe it or not, in the high school there are cameras in the hallways but not stairways, and in the middle school there are cameras in the stairways but not hallways. So it's just the way it was designed at the time. So these sums of money would allow us to increase the number of cameras and put cameras in a few different places to cover some blind spots in those various places. That kind of takes us through the FY25 technology ones. You'll see other projects continuing out in the future years, whether they be laptop, desktop replacements, different server replacements, upgrades, PA systems for the high school and middle school, replacing those out in future years as well.
Mr. Turner.
Just a quick one. I thank you for switching to this slide. I think this one's fantastic because it helps those of us who are lay people with regard to, say, the switch, knowing that it has a lifespan of 10 years, knowing when this building was built, makes complete sense that it's in the budget for this particular cycle. So that type of information, I think, is really, really helpful, and I was very happy to see that when you added that in there.
Yeah, so when we submit this request to the town, there's that spreadsheet you saw, and then each line on the spreadsheet has a companion page, and that's just pulled right from that, so. Perfect.
Ms. Burns?
Can I ask you about the security camera improvements? Are we replacing any currently that we have, or are we just adding to the arsenal?
This project would add to the arsenal.
Okay.
There's an out project a few years out, the security camera replacements, which would replace older ones as they become time to be replaced, so.
Okay, so they wouldn't replace the whole system, would
No,
just
this
be
is
as they
just
come up
adding
as?
cameras to the system.
Okay.
So it involves a vendor coming in and running network wires. A lot of it is labor. Some of the places you're putting in cameras and staircases, it's very difficult to run wires. They're built as fire safety areas, so you
Right.
can't just, punch a hole through the wall, so there's a lot of work to that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Fenlon?
I'll just ask one quick one before we get too far from the numbers here. Can you just broadly describe why the discrepancy in prices, meaning, at least by this list, FY27, $872,000, FY29, $488. I'm sure it's lifespans and things, but can you talk through that a little bit?
It's totally driven by lifespan.
Yeah.
So, if we replace the laptops at this year and we predict a 6 to 7 year lifespan, that puts it at that spot there.
Sure.
You'll see some heavy years because You may recall when I came on, there hadn't been a technology director for a few years, so some things need to be taken care of. So we did a lot of spending, and now these out years are coming, but the first things I did in my first couple of years are now coming up to be replaced again.
Sure, okay.
It's totally driven by that. And then in some cases, like you'll see, I mentioned earlier, the high school projectors, that was really on last year's capital plan, but we couldn't fit it in the budget that way based on town financial pressures, so it had to get pushed off. So you'll see some of these things move year to year based on that, and we'll have to make some decisions for available funding.
Sure. Thank you, Ken.
Mr. Smaha?
Yeah, my only comment is the way that this sort of like this looks, being able to see the years out. I just really appreciate being able to see all that. It puts everything sort of into perspective, and you kind of see, especially what you're saying, how last year, it was a year earlier, but that high school projector thing, shifts to this year. So I just appreciate the layout of that.
One thing I should have mentioned is we just started our technology planning committee. So that'll create the next 5-year technology plan. We actually had to put one meeting, have a really great group of parents, staff, a couple students involved that will start to build the plan that drives this technology plan. This technology plan that existed for 5 years ago, or 4 years ago, drove the columns for those 5 years, and we've just kind of been tacking on a year and adjusting after that. So you may see some adjustments to some things in next year's plan based upon, or expect you would, based upon the technology plan, which we would hope to bring to you this spring. So,
whenever I look at the capital planning sections of the budget presentations and just look down the ones coming up for the current year, my first instinct is always just to think, God, didn't we do that last year? I swear we replaced the switches last year and the projectors. We did that last. I know I saw the projectors last year.
Different schools.
Well, obviously, it's like because we keep doing the same thing, but just spread out over different schools and levels and so forth. And it's it would be crazy not to spread it out this way. It's like this is how you make sure that nothing actually gets too bad by putting everything on a cycle of replacement and maintenance.
And by splitting up the schools a little bit, it also enables my staff to be able to accomplish those in a reasonable amount of time in the summer, because that's our time to do it.
Sure.
Okay.
Any other question? All right, then let's move on to.
Okay, sure. You don't have to leave, Ken, but thank you. But just as Ken mentioned this, we'll provide you with an update, a great response from the community to be participating in the tech plan, which is awesome to hear. I know he was excited about their first meeting. And again, we are so fortunate to have Ken and his crew take care of these thousands of devices. The ramp up continues, of course, for adding more things to operate a school district and to support teaching and learning, and we are in good hands here in the district under Ken's leadership. He's brought a lot of stability and a lot of great leadership to the department. So switching to a little bit of more enhanced focus on capital, and one of the items that you'll note is included in the fiscal year 26 plan. So not fiscal year 25, but 26. And I know it's a little bit of an unconventional focus here or an approach, but just thought it's important to do so. We'll focus on we'll call the West Side study options. So in the capital plan you'll see a projected cost of $100,000 for a study for the West Side schools. I want to talk a little bit more about that and where that's coming from, and why it's here and why we think it's important. And we hope that you feel the same ultimately to support this going forward. So this has to do all about the MSBA project and about our elementary schools building stock and efforts as a community to try and enhance and improve those. So the next few slides will give you a little bit of a background on that, focus on the MSBA school building timelines, and then talk more about the town facility master plan and this proposed capital study. So we have had, as you know, a large number of conversations and discussions formally through our designer, Doran Whittier, and the educational visioning discussions, but also some informal discussions. And it's becoming increasingly clear, rather, that, there's a widespread support for the Wildwood project and a recognition that we need to attend to that school. And as I think most agree, all of our elementary schools. This MSBA project obviously only specifically focuses on potentially the 3 schools on the north side of town if we end up with school consolidation of some shape or form. It is becoming increasingly clear, though, that in the absence of a formal plan by the town to attend to the other 3 elementary schools on the west side, specifically the Boutwell, Shawshene, and the west, I got them all, that could be problematic. That could be problematic for the community in terms of overall, potentially, the support. It's recognized that this is a very different project than the high school was. And when you talk about a high school project in a community, it's just a different thing to be able to rally support around. That every child ultimately will end up at the high school, or the majority, not everyone. And no matter how many schools you have, they all ultimately culminate at the high school. I would imagine that was certainly the case in the discussion here in Wilmington a number of years ago. So this is different, and this has caught people's attention to say, it's wonderful that the town is supporting and ultimately brought us here to the place of being involved in the MSBA project, but what about the other side of town? The MSBA school building timelines, and again, this is all information I think I want to point out that we have and are operating with as a general understanding. So I want to clarify that it's the general understanding here of how we're approaching this. These timelines that I call out here, they really have to do with our understanding around how the MSBA project works and what we've been, what has been shared with us. That is to say that it's our understanding that a community can only have one project at a time with the MSBA, one core building project, what it's called, and our core building project is the Wildwood. We are about 5 years from the opening of a new school. Give or take months or two, but generally the round number is 5 years is what we've been told. And that the timeline that our OPM, our owner's project manager and designer have shared with the team is it's a project that is likely to open in 2028. No matter if that is a consolidated school of pre-K to 5, or if it's a pre-K to 3, or if it's a pre-K and K. New school construction with this project would open in 2028. So 5 years from now. It's anticipated that the project would likely close out in 2029. And then it's, again, our understanding that as a community, it's only then that we can apply for an MSB, excuse me, for an MSBA project. So even if the town were to be invited in and the first go-around, the first try, we'll call it in 2029, every MSBA project takes approximately 7 years. And so that's where the date comes into focus of 2036 or 2037. So in other words, if, again, with this operating understanding, if the MSBA is the required funding source for any kind of improvement, building-wide improvement for the schools on the west side of town, we're talking about potentially, and it would be a best-case scenario of 2036 or 2037, in which anything could be done on that side. And again, that's conditional upon MSBA funding. There's been discussion certainly around the town facilities master plan with some of the conversation that I know I've heard around some folks pointing the fact that the town has a facilities master plan and that overwhelmingly that plan is being followed. I'll just point out that the solution that was proposed in that 2018 town master plan identified the following to attend to the elementary schools. The first step in that plan was to renovate or add to the north and the west to accommodate grade 3 to 5. The second step in that plan was to renovate or add to the Shawshene and Woburn Street to accommodate pre-K to 2. And then the third step was ultimately the closure of the Wildwood and Boutwell. So that was a plan that's obviously a few years old at this point in time, but that was the proposal. Clearly, as we're embarking upon this, we don't know where we're going to end up with this Wildwood plan. It's possible that some of these steps are captured in that, but we don't know yet. Certainly, though. But the solution for improved school facilities ultimately ended up with 4 school building projects. And I think it's also important to point out that within that town facilities plan, there wasn't a funding solution identified for the plan. These were steps that were identified, but not a funding solution. So if that facilities master plan, the point here is that if the facilities master plan were to be the avenue towards improvement for the school facilities, and MSBA was the only funding source, we're talking about a long period of time before ultimately those 4 schools could be attended to. And obviously, there could be other possibilities, but it hits home about the importance of the long-term planning for the town. So that brings us to this idea that we put forth, and after talking with our designer and our owner's project manager, to seek their advice. Put another way, their question was, if they were us in one of our positions of sort of decision-making and recommendation, what might they suggest? And I think it's important to point out that this is sort of their suggestions or recommendations. This is not about them trying to capture more business. We have to go out to bid and all of that, but they understand our town at a deeper level in terms of the elementary school buildings. They understand what we're up against and contending with, and they really think that their recommendation is it's not too early to really try and bring focus to that west side of town, to try and figure out what the plan's going to be. Because, well, a lot of hard work and time and energy, of course, is going to go into the project for the Wildwood. If we let all of this time slip by and don't shift our focus until a new school opens, we certainly are facing buildings that are of similar age, and the Boutwell will be right there alongside the Wildwood by the time this all comes to sort of finality. So it's important, we think, that we really bring focus to this. And to that end, we believe it's important to bring a study forth in fiscal year '26. If the current project, MSBA project, results in school consolidation of 3 schools, Wildwood, Woburn, and North, we will have 3 schools that are still on the other side of town, again, all of the same vintage, and similarly, many of the same challenges with infrastructure ages. The challenge for the town is how and when it's the best time for the district to plan for upgrades and consolidation to the remaining schools. And, of course, another key question, will there be the ability to replicate the Wildwood project on the west side of town? If we end up, let's say, as a hypothetical, with a pre-K to 5 school with a Wildwood project, there might be a strong desire to create a mirror image of that. But we don't know even if that was to be the decision, if that building can fit anywhere. We can make assumptions, but until we really start to explore that and test that with obviously with the expertise of a third party, we won't know. And I think that leaves us in a challenging place to be in position. So if this were to be included in the capital study for fiscal year '26, the proposed outcomes of the proposed study would be which would include such things as how much would a project cost, where could a facility be located, start to develop conceptual designs and special specifications for cost estimating, and also help the town and the district identify a multi-phased approach, including the timing. So lots of overarching questions, but certainly some important deliverables for a potential project. And finally, for the west side of town, at the present time, as we sit here, there's no specific planning or activity underway for the schools on the west side of town. The Wildwood project obviously is underway, but again, as mentioned, it's only able to focus on the north side. This study, if ultimately supported and was able to be brought online, would allow the town to identify possible solutions for the other 3 elementary schools, assuming that the current MSBA project results in the consolidation of the 3 schools on the north side. So a lot of background information, but again, we wanted to bring focus to the fact that we recognize that we really do need to get underway with better understanding what the possibilities are for the west side of town. I think residents, many stakeholders have identified this as a desperate desire to know what that looks like, and we think it's important to try and bring focus to it. So I'll stop there for any questions or comments you may have.
Mr. Smaha.
I have actually a bunch of questions and comments regarding this. And I'll sort of start with thank you for bringing this up. I think this is a really important piece for us to be exploring and thinking about. If we don't, the town, in my opinion, for years and years and years has done nothing for their schools. I mean, there's this high school, there's the middle school, but our elementary schools have been neglected for years and years and years. And if we think about what happened with the Wildwood School, sort of in terms of failing, you know, that's our oldest school, but as you alluded to earlier, all the schools are around the same age. Wildwood was built in 1955. You know, the Boutwell is 61, so it's just a few years older. So, you know, I think if we wait for the Wildwood project to be complete before deciding what to do next, we're already waiting too long. If we did that, the Boutwell, for example, would be, you know, so if the Wildwood was built in 55, that means it was 65 years old when this SOI was submitted in 2020. If we waited until 2029 to submit for the Boutwell, that would make the Boutwell, which was built in 61, 68 years old, right? So even, you know, older than the Wildwood when we submitted the SOI. So I think that this makes a lot of sense, and I think putting it off, you know, I'm sorry, that's not correct, not putting it off, but waiting until 25, 26, I think makes a lot of sense. I guess one of my questions is, will we know around that time that this study might be done, would we know the makeup of the Wildwood at that point?
Yes.
Like if it's going to be just K, you know, pre-K, K to 5 or whatever.
This time next year, we will know, before this time next year, but in the fall,
Okay.
We will have clear direction for what the project, grade level wise and such will be,
Configuration.
the site will be, those kind of things, yes.
Okay. All right, I'll stop there.
Mr. Fennelly.
Thank you. I'll start by saying I fully support this. I think to Mr. Samaha's point, it's a great idea. We need to do this, and so I am on board. I have a question on one of the bullets in one of the slides here. And it says, it's on page 8, it says, "It's clear from the MSBA project leadership team that if there is not a plan outlined for the Boutwell, Shawshene, and West schools, support for the Wildwood MSBA project could be at risk." Can you elaborate? Are we suggesting that the MSBA will pull their support?
Great question, sorry.
Are we suggesting that residents of this town will not support the project if we're not working on sort of the sister project, for lack of a better, can you just explain that a little bit more for me, please?
Thank you very much for the opportunity and for the opportunity to clarify. So the MSBA project leadership team, what I mean specifically by that, and I apologize for not being more clear, is we have an internal working group that includes representation, Paul and I from the school department, town representation, and then our owner's project manager, our OPM, which is SMMA, and then our Doran Whittier, which is our design team.
Okay.
That's what I mean by the MSBA project leadership team. It's not the MSBA itself.
Sure.
We meet regularly yesterday. We meet weekly for this project. We've had a fair degree of conversation about this. And again, based upon some of the feedback specifically through the visioning as mentioned, it really caught people's attention that this was a point of conversation from those that were involved, that they're all for and in support of this, but very concerned about, again, the absence of something on the other side of town. So this is, that's what that's referencing.
Thank you.
Dr. McCaldy?
Yep, just a couple things. So thank you for the overview. Regarding the request to do the look at the feasibility study again, I agree with that. You know, I recognize a lot of work went into the facilities master plan years ago, for sure, and it does provide a viable path, but priorities, times have changed, so it might be good to revisit it and see if that is still the best plan, or could there be other ideas. And I think one thing you highlight is showing equity on both sides of town potentially, where if the north side of town decides to consolidate to one school, are we going to follow the facilities master plan because we have a facilities master plan and then still have two schools on the other side of town? That can be a little disjointed. So I agree with my colleagues here and yourself that could be time and money well spent. getting back to just how this whole process works with buildings and capital improvements. So you showed really nice was capital purchases for the district. But something I noticed missing out of there was, building capital. So if we need to fix a bathroom or buy some ovens, or not ovens, but the buildings and everything like that. How does that work in the town? That doesn't seem to come through the school district. Maybe it goes through somewhere else, right?
Yeah, if I may. So the town departments have their own capital plans in 5-year and possibly longer. So school building related capital planning comes from the Public Buildings Department, and they have in their plan replacing roofs, windows, boilers, and so forth. So they'll submit that as part of their capital plan. And Department of Public Works as well, if a parking lot needs to be repaved, things like that, that'll be part of their normal upkeep of parking lots and so forth. They will put that in their capital plan. So all the capital goes into one giant plan, if you will, because I have police, fire, there's a whole group as well as the schools, and then the town has to determine, from a priority standpoint, what can be supported and so forth. So, but from what you're asking, it's the Department of Public Buildings that will put in for those type of repairs, and we don't have that expertise. They have the expertise of, what's the life of the current roof on whatever school it is, and how long it will last, and so forth. So.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying.
Is that something that we have a communication and collaboration with them, because we know things from occupying the buildings constantly that perhaps they don't necessarily know?
Yeah, so we'll have discussions on when they put in the budget, and then clearly if it gets approved through the budgeting process, we have extensive conversations on when, the timing of when something might be done and what we might need to do. For instance, we had a window project at the North Intermediate at one point, and IKEA's programs at the North Intermediate for the summer, so we had to work with them in IKEA's department to move the summer program from the north to the Woburn Street. So there's always collaboration and discussion and so forth.
Ms. Burns?
Steve, if I could relinquish it to Mr. Turner, he's been waiting, and
Thank you.
I can go after him if you don't mind.
Thank you,
Mr. Turner.
So first of all, thank you very much for the presentation. I certainly support it, and part of what I'd like to highlight is we've heard some conversations from the Select Board and the Finance Committee that there's a clear understanding of a need on both sides with all of the elementary schools. And so I think there's a town-wide view that, yes, we have a project in process on the north side, hopefully pre-K to 5, and that, yes, the west side will need to be addressed. And one of the comments has been made that even with MSBA funding, depending on funding rates, doing the project sooner on our own might actually be cheaper. So potentially doing this in 26 opens the door to starting the project even sooner, which I think could very well be in the town's interest from a fiscal perspective. And obviously for the students and teachers and community involved, the sooner we can start it, the sooner it's open. So I think my initial reaction was, why wait till 26? But I understand from another conversation, there's logical steps with the planning of Wildwood potential replacement that make 26 make the right time, since it's the right time. So I think the timing is right. I think the usefulness of the study is clear. And I think I do believe the town will support it as a logical way to move all of the elementary education forward together. So thank you.
Ms. Burns?
I too am in absolute agreement with the timeline, and especially moving forward with the study. I know I've said before that I think my grave concern is identifying sites and problem solving this as we're in the midst with Wildwood. I do think that I know there's a lot going on. There's a broader financial picture here that where the public monies are tied up at the town level with other building projects that they have identified as priority over the West Side project, and what that looks like with the payment of the high school, the payment of what they'll be paid on the Wildwood, and I know There's been discussion of Proposition 2.5 overrides at the next, upcoming town meetings and such, and that's a real concern. But the other real concern, and I have to agree with Mr. Turner wholeheartedly, in the sense that the longer we wait to address the west side, I think would be the foundational first step forward, that we at least have a plan when we get to that point when we want to execute. But waiting for another building to fail unexpectedly, and then having us, it created, these poor parents and children, it created such, and never mind our central team, creating so much discourse in our learning, in student learning, in family schedules, that we can't, and the loss of learning because of the shifting of everything. I think everyone was stellar in meeting a very.
On our staff.
Sorry?
Burdens on our staff.
Yep.
In addition to families and children.
But everyone was just so stellar, making the best of a really difficult situation. It can't be said enough. But we also can't afford running the risk of a failure, which very well could happen by the time that others may be ready to start having the discussion. Never mind moving forward with it. It just can't, because it's not fair to taxpayers, it's not fair to our students, it's not fair to our staff, to get into a situation. The Wildwood was a lesson learned. Many years we talked about knowing, and the town knew, it's just timing and money, that our elementary schools have to be addressed. Fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, but I'm just saying is that we can't ill afford to have a similar situation happen again with our schools. We just can't. And so I think this is a very logistical, I think it's a reasonable approach to start that piece. We are going to have to do it. So stepping forward with a feasibility study, especially just site, envisioning, problem solving, that aspect alone is a step forward. And whenever we do get to that point where fiscally we can move forward with building the schools on the west side, we just cannot not do it, in my opinion. Thank you.
I agree with nearly everything that's been said so far. I think it's also worth noting that even if building failure, because there's more than just age that goes into whether a building is going to actually continue to be occupiable. But even beyond that issue of whether we're overly concerned about whether the buildings will actually be occupiable and or whether they'll fail, but they're also not meeting the needs of our students right now as educational spaces. And that is something that, even if they can, even if they don't fall down, they're still going to, have that, have that issue. That's not going away. I think to me this is largely just about kind of hitting the sweet spot for timing, because I think everyone agrees that we shouldn't do it now because it's too far away. Like any potential, even like really thinking building, we're in the midst of the Wildwood project. Obviously, we wouldn't want to do it now. And if you wait too long, then maybe we're missing out on some opportunities that we have to be taking the steps we can. We're not going to be building a school on the west side anytime that soon, but the idea here is, of course, what can we do to put us into the best possible situation for when the opportunities arise that we've already done some of our homework and we're not starting from scratch at that point. And so I think that kind of just comes down to when is the best time to push a study like this forward. And right now, this is our best estimate. We're not doing it this year, we're not proposing it for next year, but we think the year after that, right now, looks like a good time to be doing this kind of analysis. And maybe we'll think differently about it, when we get a little bit closer to that time. But that's kind of the idea, that we want to do this, find the Goldilocks moment of when do we get the data that is still relevant when we actually go to look at the options that we have over there, but that gives us enough lead time that we are taking advantage of the knowledge that we gain from this study. And I think right now 2026 looks pretty good right now.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you for the feedback. We don't think there's anything further at this time to do. The intention is to continue to move this forward. And I think it's actually a great segue into this next item on the agenda tonight, if I can, just to go through into that. But it's also becoming more and more clear to our team that as the more that we start to envision a new school, regardless of if it's a pre-K, we are going to, as a district, and you as a governing body, we're going to have to think fairly quickly about our ability to be able to replicate the best that we can on the other side of town, the programs and services that are going to be planned for this new school. And I know it's hard to kind of wrap your head around, it's 5 years away from now, but as a simple example, which I'll talk about in just a moment in here, all-day pre-K, I'm bringing that online or back online. We may have some spatial challenges, literally, on the other schools, and so that's going to take us down a whole other host, regardless of boilers and system failures and such. So it's becoming more clear to me that there's an absolute parallel track here that we just, collectively need to be cognizant of. This next item is meant to just provide you as a school committee and the community with a bit of a window in terms of some of the considerable planning that has been taking place over the last few weeks. This isn't, that this is this is a school committee, as the governing body, is important to keep you well informed of this project. We also have the Wildwood School Building Committee that is an important entity here, so it's really trying to provide an update for you tonight. The central office team, our designer, Doran Whittier, and our owner's project manager have spent a lot of time over the last 6 weeks or so, a lot of time planning this project. Again, it's sort of hard to think about it's 5 years away. I just said a moment ago when it's going to open, but I certainly know, as Dr. Bryson knows and Mr. Turner knows, who have been at the table for these conversations, a lot of time and effort right now that needs to happen with the central office team, as well as our 3 building principals and, again, the designer and owner's project manager. It's at that place in the project right now where we have been focusing on what this building needs to have in terms of space. Because our design team needs to understand that at a very deep level to then go to do their work and to start to figure out how big does this building need to be, what the layout might be, and where can it fit, site location. So the memo that's included in here, there's not a presentation to accompany this, but the memo just is to provide you with an overarching sort of 20,000-foot view of what we've been discussing and some assumptions that we are making. I do want to take this moment, though, to remind the committee that there's what's called, I spoke about this before, an educational program plan. I think I have that title right, that the MSBA will require from the district for this project, the Wildwood project. This is a very extensive document that you'll be asked to approve the middle of March, is right now. So sounds like a little ways away, but it's not. We've already started hard at work at that. And some of the many aspects that are touched upon this memo will be incorporated in terms of that program plan. We extended an invitation, as you can see in the memo, to try to welcome our town partners as much as possible. Invitations to join these meetings, as you noted there, were sent out, and we had a variety of representatives you can see on the second page. But I really want to bring focus to some of the assumptions that are guiding this work right now. And so I'm going on to the third page of the memo, and I apologize, I just noted that numbers are not included on here, page numbers. But under the guiding assumptions, our design team, Doran Whittier, again, needs to have a deep sense of what we are envisioning for this building to be. And so there are a number of assumptions that I lay out here. The first assumption is in terms of general programming. And that is, we are trying to take what we have in place right now, what we offer in terms of our educational program at the elementary level, and that includes not just, of course, the regular curriculum or the core curriculum, but also such things as library, music, visual arts, physical education, and health. All of these require spatial considerations, and so they need to have an understanding of that, and their expertise allows them to take our vision for including that in the program. They know what the enrollment possibilities will be for the 3 various school variations, and then they'll take the square footage and start to work with that to build that. So that's the first assumption in terms of sort of general programming. What we're offering now at the elementary school, largely speaking, we want to recreate that. We want that to look quite similar, but with some exceptions. Assumption number 2 is one of those exceptions, and that's an addition of a STEAM or STEM learning space. It's quite clear to, I think, many of us who are familiar with more modern school facilities that having some dedicated space to support science, technology, engineering, and math is really so vital, so important. None of our elementary schools have that dedicated space right now. I would bet it would be hard for us to find, if we visited new schools that were, say, just constructed in the last 5 years, probably even 10, I would say that most would have that. We are making an assumption that we should add that space, that we should add dedicated STEM learning space to the new school facility. Those that went on the school tours we talked about before saw these spaces in, maybe not in action, but they saw these spaces, and they certainly recognize the importance of this. So we're making an assumption that we should add that kind of program space to the new school. Assumption number 3, if I can go through these and then we can come back for questions. Assumption number 3 is world language. This came up through some of the visioning conversations for those that were perhaps a part of that. We currently don't offer world language at the elementary level right now, as I think everyone's aware. Some school districts do. I have no way to be able to tell you how many do or don't in the Commonwealth, but some do, some don't. There was some conversation about this, and certainly further conversation with our principals of those 3 schools and our leadership team. After a lot of consideration, we thought that the recommendation at this time would be not to dedicate space, physical space in a new school facility to offer world language. That's not to say that we might at some point not explore or consider adding world language to the program, but there's a very big difference between actually literally developing space for that in the footprint of the building. It's not our recommendation to do that right now, because we don't have it right now, because I don't think as a district we're ready to go down that path at this point in time and ask our designers and ultimately our residents to say, this is really so important to us, we want to add space. But that's an assumption that the team is making here for discussion, certainly with you. Again, because this is something that you would be approving as part of the educational program plan. Assumption 4 is the separation of space pre-K to grade 2 and grades 3 to 5. So this is largely focusing on the pre-K to 5 possibility, and I want to stress that. Certainly no decisions have been made. And the reason that I point this out is because this idea emerged from the visioning. The designers are going to start to work with this, and they understand that this might result in some replication of spaces. This will be a pretty big building for 800 students, 800 plus students. And so there may need to be some spaces added to try and support the pre-K to 2 and grade 3 to 5 separation. There was some strong feedback that was thought to be best, and also to try and create learning spaces that were more localized for the different grade levels, so we didn't have to have students wandering all over the building to go to their different some of their different subjects like library or music and so on. And assumption 5, special education. We are working hard, and we've started many conversations here around what this would look like. And this is important because this does require a very dedicated space to support many of our programs. This will be part of my thought here, is just to have a more focused presentation to you as a school committee in the coming weeks about special education. That seems to be, this is, as you know, a very large area of our operation. But the planning is taking the programs that we have, albeit over 3 schools, bringing them together under one roof, and what that would look like and what that would require for space. But it's an assumption that we're making that we want to continue to support these, a full array of special education services, and that includes both inclusion as well as some of these more intensive programs. And assumption 6, all-day pre-kindergarten, as I noted in the memo, we did have this in the past prior to the pandemic for a variety of different reasons. We shifted away from that, but we are approaching this building with making the assumption that we would want to bring that back as a district. We're also thinking about a more focused presentation to you as a committee in the coming weeks about this, just so you can understand better some of the thinking around that. So again, I'll pause there, certainly welcome any questions. Again, these are assumptions we're making, the leadership team's making. Ultimately, you as a committee are going to have to approve these, but we thought it important to get you up to speed. And I don't know if, Dr. Brayson, you want to comment or add anything more, or Mr. Turner, on your involvement in the process, but it was great to have you there, so.
Go ahead first, Johnson.
About the process itself, it was fantastic to be in the room with the building leaders, with the central office team, to go through some of these, and hear the discussions, and take part to some degree as well, of the way they had the vision of what the school could look like, the excitement at certain points, but also then there was a lot of discussion about very, very deep details about how the unified arts type programs would work, the principals discussing amongst themselves on those sorts of topics, but also a lot of dive on the special education topics, as you mentioned, and what was best for the students and how we could manage and have them have the best experience through those pre-K through 5 grades within the building, and having the spaces in the right sort of places. But then there was also a clear acknowledgement about being efficient, and people wanting to make sure that, okay, this is great, we can have these sorts of collaborative spaces, these sorts of breakout spaces, but how many do we need, and how big should they be? Can we do it this way and that way to try and be efficient about the space, and not just, well, we want it all. And so there was a clear acknowledgement about the impact at the end of the day to what is going to be asked of the town to support, but all within the excitement of educational opportunity. I'm very, very glad I took part, and it was really a very good experience.
Yeah, I echo that. And the amount of detail that went into, I had no idea. So now I'm looking at this, I'm like, it seems so simplified, but it is not simple. And having the administrators in that space with us was really helpful, and to hear from them when they're talking about how they need to have these sort of pull-out spaces, but they're connected to the larger room, and they want it to be near here, and then Dora and Whittier are mixing things around and moving the cafeteria here, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I mean, there's so much depth to it that I would never have, and I've been in a lot of school buildings, and I didn't realize sort of that at one point people sat around a table for hours and talked through square footage and took away, well, if we made this a little bit bigger, would MSBA approve that? Okay, if they approve that, we have to take some space off here. I mean, it is literally like checks and balances all over the place. So it was really an incredible experience to be a part of that, and to see the amount of thought that went into it, and then to have it here sort of simplified in a few pages. I'm like, it doesn't even come close to the amount of conversation. So any shifts that the committee were to say, ooh, I don't know if I like, there's a lot behind that. So it's not as simple as we were like, I don't really want that. Like it was like hours of conversation, square footage, discussion, discussing what MSB, it was just awesome. And their knowledge, Dora and Whittier, of like the MSBA pieces of it was really great. Like they knew the answers to everything. And that was so, I think for us, so like calming, because I was like, okay, well, they know what's going on and they know how to do it. Because if not, I think I love to spend and move, and I'd be like, can't we just double the size? It was like, so it was a great experience. And I think just for you to know, a ton of thought went into this. And so anything that we were to push back on, I would be really sort of be thoughtful about that and careful about changing things.
Ms. Barnes?
I think the assumptions are great. The recommendations you had offered, especially on the world language piece, I think we could still offer that, but in a different way. I don't think a designated space, I'm hard pressed to think a designated space would not, not having one would not allow us to grow that potential programming within our district, even through collaborative methods elsewhere. My biggest, I think, and perhaps it just requires additional insight from the discussions, is the all-day pre-kindergarten. I just want to ensure that, I know that as I wrote to you, there's been a big push and continues to be a big push across the Commonwealth for preschool and access to preschool. And I know that our preschool is self-sufficient on the tuitions it collects, I'm presuming. I don't want to, if in fact in the future that pre-K does become a mandatory, I don't want to say grade, that's probably not the right descriptor, but mandatory class or aspect. I don't want to short ourselves off just, short ourselves because of space. You know what I mean? If we need to create more space, I think it's been hugely successful. I know, not that I followed it recently in the past couple of years, but I know that there's always been wait lists to get in. But we're still doing AM, PM sessions. It's just not one all-day class, right?
Yes, that's
Okay,
right.
all right.
Yeah. Yeah, and the presentation, if I may, the presentation that I know I've asked Alice to work on and her team will provide you with much more detail about this to try and put it into context. There's some information on on other districts and where they're at with the offering of this. So I think it'll help inform you, help put this into more perspective. So.
Okay. I just didn't know what to.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think some of the additional presentations you've proposed, especially on special education, would be extremely valuable for us to think about and see in the future.
I'm trying to think about the fact that you're going to be, we're going to have to ask you to take a look at a very extensive document, and there's some aspects that I think will be more straightforward and not, but some that probably may require just a sort of front loading to try and do this in a rather short window of time and not trying to add more meetings to your calendar. So trying to think about some of these presentations that I meant that I think they're already in the works, and hopefully that will be helpful so that when you get this document, you're quite well informed already, because we want that. That's important. And these are important stakes in the ground that we'll put in place that will define the educational program that the school will open with. So we want you to obviously be comfortable and supportive of that.
Mr. Turner?
So besides the general overview, I do have a specific comment, and this is where I'm going to do exactly what Dr. Bryson suggested we not do. I did want to raise the topic of world languages. I appreciate the expertise of the team, and I understand the logic of why not at this point in time. But I strongly support foreign language, and I strongly support it at all levels. And I think it's an opportunity for us to explore it. There are clear benefits for foreign language learning with its own benefit, but also in support of English language learning, in support of mathematics, and in support of reading. In the real world these days, most companies you go to work for, either your customers, your suppliers, or your colleagues, are in a foreign country. So a lot of jobs, some jobs, may ask for foreign language. A lot of jobs say foreign language a plus. And I think being able to help our students get to the point, and I know we're getting there with middle school through high school, but if we had a comprehensive program across all 12 grades, being able to have them always check off that plus would give them a real world advantage in the long run. So if we're going to move forward with the assumptions as drafted, and again, there's very good logic as to why that decision was made in the room, and I respect that. I do think we need to make sure that as a priority, in the period towards when the building opens, we evaluate other creative ways to enable world languages. And there could be some really good opportunities that could drive the same benefits, again, without potentially the classroom, but to give the benefit to those kids. So when they're getting to the middle school, they're already into the foreign language learning experience, but they've also gotten the cultural aspects, and they've also gotten the other benefits that come along in the other parts of the curriculum.
Mr. Smaha?
I know when my kids were in elementary school, there was an after-school language program. Is that still offered? Do we know?
Global Child.
Yeah. At least as a few years ago it was.
You're going to actually collaborate. That might be a collaboration aspect, a potential, because it's a program that's been within this district for quite a long time. I mean, before I got in on this and was aware of it, and they've had their successes, and I think maybe collaborating in that realm, I'm not against it. I think, in any sense of the word, I just think I think as it's germane to this particular piece with regards to creating a separate space, I don't think separate space necessarily. I'm just not convinced at this juncture. I'm not, but I am. Anything that can enhance, and challenge and broaden one's thought process and mind, for our kids, I think is always beneficial.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 8, subcommittee reports. Any subcommittee reports? I have one. Which is that the School Wellness Advisory Council met last week on the 28th, and we received a food services update from Mary Palin and some of the initiatives that she's working on. Who knew that we had grass-fed beef burgers in the cafeterias these days, and a lot of local fresh fruits and vegetables. There's also discussion about the new health and physical education curriculum with Lars Stinson, and some appreciation for some of the new components of the curriculum, as well as the way that that's been split out now into different grade bands. So it's not as much as just like a 1 through 5, but like been split into like 1 through 3 or 1 through 2, I forget where it is. But like the elementary has been split into like separate grade bands so that it's more targeted towards the specific age groups. And then Christine Murray also gave some presentation about YRBS and the YRBS report that mirrored, of course, what the committee discussed and saw at the last regular session meeting. That was the School Wellness Advisory Council. Number 9, any correspondence?
None this evening.
All right, that leaves us with future important dates. So on December 13th, the Wildwood School Building Committee meeting will be here at the high school at 6 p.m. December 14th, the high school orchestra trip to the senior center, 11:15 p.m. Also on the 14th, the 5th and 6th grade band performance at the high school auditorium at 7 p.m. On December 15th, the West Winter Choral Concert at the West Cafeteria at 9:30 a.m. December 19th, the 5th and 6th grade strings performance at the middle school auditorium at 7 p.m. December 20th, our last regular school committee meeting of 2023, 7 p.m. here in this room, and then winter break in 2024. Dr. Brown.
I was, sorry, I was just going to add one omission, but tomorrow night is the middle school and high school orchestra in the auditorium. Did I?
Oh, that's
Okay.
right.
And I can tell you, I saw a picture the last night was packed with so many students in our choirs now. It was more than standing room only in the auditorium, so quite a display.
Yeah, I shouldn't have missed that. My kid's in it. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be here tomorrow. So.
No, the choir was fantastic. And there is also the band on the 12th. Middle school, high school band will be here on the 12th as well. So, yes, choir was a fantastic. I've never seen that room that full.
No.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, and that brings us to the end of the agenda, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Bird, seconded by Mr. Samaha, and all in favor? And the committee is adjourned.
Thank you,
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Judgment for the plaintiff.